Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes mini review. Today we're going to be taking a look at how to build and detail Model Railroad Scenes Volume 2 from Model Railroader Books. So just before we take a look at this book, I just want to remind you that the things that I'm looking for in an instructional manual for terrain, which includes railroad guides, which overlap heavily with terrain making, is that I'm looking for good images of the techniques. I'm looking for good explanation of the techniques in the text that accompanies those photos. I'd like to see, I'd like to judge what the technical skill level of the things they're showing you are, how difficult, how professional are they in terms of the finished work, and also do they have pictures of the finished work to help guide you to see what your end result is going to be. As a bonus, it'd be nice if they have reference photos of what they're trying to make so we can see the real world and then how close or how they adapted it into their own techniques and work. So this is part of the Model Railroad book series. I believe that is, I'm not going to say. I was thinking that this is part of a magazine and that they're accruing techniques from articles from the magazine, but this is written by Lou Sassy. Pardon me, Lou, if I've pronounced your name incorrectly. So it may be a series of articles from Lou, or perhaps it was a dedicated book that is part of the Model Railroader books as a line. Of course, this is volume 2, so there you go. So taking a look at this. All right. What we are presented with are a series of chapters, and in this book, the chapters are divided primarily by conceptual, finished diorama snippets. I don't know if that made sense, but so when we look at chapter 1, it's weathering an HO scale firehouse, right? It's about the firehouse and where he puts it on his layout. Chapter 2, streets and ground cover, right? He wants to get a crossing across the streets for his railroad. Farm implement dealer, he's going to make a scene where there's a store that sells farm implements, tractors, that sort of idea. So it's really broken up by projects, which is kind of a nice way to organize it. I tend to like that myself. So let's take a look at our criteria that I'm assessing as important. So we're looking at the images of the techniques. How good do they depict, she depict, the actual techniques that are being used? Now, here we can see the technique is adding detail to a model of a railroad, of a firehouse at HO scale, and he wanted to change the intensity of the mortar between the bricks, so he's adding that, wiping it off, didn't like the final look, added another layer of effects to it, and then has his finished railroad house, firehouse down below. So I think it did a nice job showing you what he's trying to do and what the finished effect was. Again, that's another important piece. Just to give you, let's go over another example here. Here he wants to put in a road on the outside of where he's got his couple of his structures, right? So he's marking it out on his foam, putting down tape. He's going to pave the street. All right, so he's applying paving and some drains in the street, and shows a little bit about how he's been doing the land around that area. And then we come to him scribing in the sidewalks, and then let's just keep going here, how he's going to bridge the railroad tracks. So it's it's pretty good showing you the step-by-step process. I got a little lost on one or two of these, but to be fair, I was skimming. I've had this book for many, many years now, and so this was really just going back through it again to see, to prep for this review. And so by skimming it, I may have jumped a little too far ahead. So I don't want to say it's confusing, because I think for the most part it's fairly straightforward. And I'll tell you what, let's just go right to, oh, you know what? So here's the end where he's put in the ballast, and he is, finishing up his tracks, and I believe the finished piece is first shown, and there we go. And so here we're getting the photo of that finished, there we go, of that finished project. So you can see what his road looks like, what his tracks sort of look like with the train on it, how the firehouse came out. Here's the other house, and so you get the finished look. So starts off with, here's what I want to build to make it look like this. Here's how I went about doing it, which is, I think, a nice organization for the project. What would I say is the technical skill level of the material shown in here? I would say the technical skill is somewhere in the medium range, beginner plus, let's call it. All right, and by that I mean, so here, right, again, here's the finished picture of the project. And then he goes through and shows how he had this building, but he modifies it. So he built a small office building off to the side of it. He then changed the back end of it, added in tractors. That's a tractor dealership. Shows some of the tractors that he's using. There is actually an original photo of a John Deere that he wants to model, so that's nice. I like to see that. There are very few of those, however, in this book, but there's an example of what I'm talking about. And here's another actual photo of a few tractors that he's using as a guide. And that leads into, and this is where I'm saying it's medium technical level, beginner to medium. So he wants to change his tractor models to better reflect the actual models, the actual vehicles that he's modeling, I should say. And so here he's actually doing some customization to the tractor. I don't know, there's a little printing error here of some sort, but breaking down the parts of his tractor, showing, right, his modified tractor versus the original model, right? So he's clipped off the hub so he could bring these in tighter the way they should be. He's towed in these front wheels the way they should be. Shows a little bit about how he did some of that work. So he's doing some customization with some existing models, which does really add a lot and is definitely a step up. But one of the things that I felt like, hold on, where is the actual tractors? All right, well, we can look at him here. They're getting ready to ship them out. He does all that great modification, but it lacks the next step, which would be to add some real weathering to these vehicles to give them a more 3D, a more realistic look. The bright yellow plastic wheels really jump out, and you lose a lot of the authenticity that could have been gotten. He's already taken the step to modify it, but just didn't follow through with one more step to bring that authenticity level up higher. So that's why I say medium level in terms of instruction. Let's take what's out there, let's make it a little bit better, but we're not going to get into advanced techniques in this book. And there is, of course, a section on actually building the bench. That's part of railroad books, right? Is how are you going to lay your track, which is the least interesting to those of us who are strictly in it for terrain. And just to give you a little bit more sense of some of the things that are shown here, this was actually interesting to me. He is making some trees, and he is making the trees, right, they're going to go in this scene. So again, here we have a nice finished, what should our scene look like when we're done, which is great. And then we have the materials that he's used, how he obtained them, modifications that he's making to them. This is Super Sage and fine leaf foliage from Woodland Scenics, and Woodland Scenics, yeah, I had to think about that for a second, right? How does he mount them? What's his overall layout going to be? And some of the techniques that he went through to achieve that. So it's a nice diversity of things covered in this book, and rather than list the actual techniques, right, we're really looking at it from a project-oriented guide, but each of those projects incorporates different elements, you know, such as snow, trees, ground cover, streets, detailing houses, and that kind of idea. So that gives you an overview of the How to Build and Detail Model Railroad Scenes by Lou Assassi, and we will move back out and I'll give you my final thoughts. So that gives you an overview of the model How to Build and Detail Model Railroad Scenes Volume 2. And a couple quick thoughts on it before I wrap up is to just say, you know, there are pros and cons with any of these reference materials. Some of the pros that I saw for this one was melted snow. It's a nice, simple technique that's very effective. And actually, it was really important to me when I first was starting out. And it's even nice to review it again because it's doing it a different way than I've been doing it. And I was like, oh, that's probably easier. It's got some basics on some simple weathering. It's got some interesting enhancements for trees, maybe not perfect for terrain that's going to be handled a lot, but is workable and certainly better for dioramas. It's got nice step-by-step photos of the actual techniques being used, which is great. And shows also a little bit about how to plan when you're doing a multi-piece setup, how to space out your buildings, how to think about where the roads are going to be. Now, you may not be doing buildings and you may not be doing roads, but the concept is the same. And so it's nice to get a sense of how it might be useful to do that kind of a pre-thinking for your layout. The cons for this would be that the number of techniques and topics is not tremendous. It is, you know, a thin book, shall we say. It's still a bit of more of a fundamentals book. So when they do weathering on the buildings, they're doing a very basic level of weathering, all right? Something to just knock down the plastic sheen and add a little bit of shading, right? So we're not getting into advanced concepts, so it's a fundamental book still. And of course, because it is a book geared towards railroad hobbyists, you're still looking at 25% of the book really being only usable by railroad hobbyists, because most of us are not going to be wiring a railroad layout, for instance. All right. As I said before, when I did the previous video on the Woodland Scenics Scenery Manual, would I buy it? Yes, because it has one thing in there that's new to me, and that's enough for me to feel like it's a worthy purchase. But that's maybe not representative of everybody. If I was going to make a general recommendation, do I think it's worth buying? I give it a moderate recommendation. Great fundamentals, building on some basic skills, but it's not a must-have because it is a little limited in its scope. But however, it's also relatively inexpensive. This was put out in 2009, and I took a quick look on Amazon for it, and I saw that you could get a used copy for $5. So for $5, it's kind of hard to go wrong in terms of a reference book to put on your shelf. So that's something to think about. Now, I'm a little confused because this says Volume 2, and I have another book by the Model Railroader Books with almost the same title, and it says Edition 3. So I don't know if it's the next one in this series because it has a different author. But in any case, I have that book coming up next, and so we can see the evolution of this, if you will, and see how a different author makes their take on an instructional book like this. So I do think there's a bit of offering in that for the average wargame terrain hobbyist. So give it a consideration. Think about if it's right for you. Hopefully some of that was helpful. If you have questions, feel free, leave them down in the comments. Happy to try to do my best to help you out with that. And if you know of an awesome reference book, as I mentioned before in the previous book video, I'm always eager to see if it's something that is worth my while. So please feel free to throw awesome book titles at me, and I'll keep building the collection, and I'll keep sharing them with you as hopefully as I read through them. I'd like to read it all before I talk about it with you, so I got to keep reading and keep up. Well, hopefully you will come back and join me for some of those future books whenever and wherever they come, because you know I will be coming back soon with another TerranScapes video.